Mary, Meenakshi, and Allison, I want to thank you so much for joining us today at the Chennai Storytelling Festival and for conducting this workshop, which is titled Miscarriage and Stillbirth, Sharing Stories and Making Memories. So thank you very much. Please introduce yourselves fully and tell us about your work and please conduct this workshop. And now I'm going to spotlight the three of you, and I'm going to mute everybody else, so we'll be all set. Spotlight number one. Spotlight number two. Spotlight number three. Okay, please take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric, for that wonderful welcome. And thank you everyone here for joining us so early in the morning in India and from wherever you are. It means a lot to us. So I am Mary and I am from Mumbai, and a very warm welcome to this gathering. It's a very heartfelt offering from our end on sharing stories of miscarriage and stillbirth for people who have experienced it, or you have been a caregiver for someone who has had this experience as a caregiver in any capacity. So shall we get started? So we will give our bios in the chat as we go along. And you can pick it up from there. Is that okay, Allison and Meenakshi?
Yes, yes.
So as we gather, let's just take a couple of minutes to ground as we are seated, coming and just feeling our feet on the ground and sitting up or wherever we are as we feel comfortable, and just coming into the space together, feeling the contact that the earth makes with our feet or wherever we are seated. And taking a few deep breaths here as we come into the space to share stories, to support each other. The intention here today is to share stories and listen. We gently open our eyes. Thank you. So we will start now with this personal storytelling first. Would request you if you would like to gather a paper or colors for the second part, you could do that now. And the intention today is to share and listen to stories and explore it. We will refrain from giving advice, and this is just kind of a cautionary note that I'm sharing. I know we are all here to listen, and the stories will be recorded. The sharing later will not be recorded. We will enable chat in between two stories, so you all can share your reflections, resonances, questions, if any, in the chat. We'll take it up from there. So first to go is Meenakshi. Yes, Meenakshi.
Yes. Many years ago, I remember it was a weekend. It was a Saturday, very early in the morning, probably around 4 or 4:30. My husband had, very strictly told me not to use it now because many times we had used it and we had seen only failure. But, I just could not control my inquisitiveness. So I just made sure that my husband was in deep asleep, and I, slowly went inside the restroom, went through the usual process. One line came up that was very usual. I did not really want to see what is happening next. I really wanted to see what is happening next. It was a mixed feeling. But I slowly started seeing the second line coming up. As the line was, the second line was coming up, I could really feel my face just blooming up. I could feel a flower in my face. I checked the results again. I cross-checked the results again. I did so many reviews again and again because I wanted to make sure whether this particular good thing was happening to me. Yes, it did happen, and I wanted to see the happiness in my face first. So I went to the mirror in the restroom and I saw my face, and oh my God, it was so shining without any makeup or anything, just from sleep. But I was so pretty. I was looking so pretty with that broad smile on my face. So, something good has happened. So if something good has happened, the fruits of it is more only when you share it. So immediately I went and I woke my husband and I showed this kit to him. The moment he saw a pregnancy kit, he knew that I was up to something. After telling so many times, I am really up to something again. And the moment he opened his eyes a little wide, and even when he saw the two lines together, I could see the same flower blossoming in his face as well. And it was such a nice start of a day. I have never had a day which had started so well in my life. We went to the OBGYN, all the normal process happened. She saw our my HCG levels, and she confirmed my pregnancy. We came back home. We were abroad at that particular time. So we called up our parents and we shared the news with them. The moment we shared with them and they telling their stories and they were so happy about it, it was really, our happiness doubled that day. We definitely wanted to triple and multiply our happiness many times by telling more and more people. But, we wanted to restrict ourselves. We thought we'll do it after some time. And the next few days went in a very different way. It is something like a new love feeling. Many times we both separately were thinking about the new life which is going to come into our home. Many times we both were discussing about it, though we did not go for any further planning or anything. So some unmeaningful conversations we had. It was so, that entire few days were so pleasant. Even if I think about it now, they were such pleasant days. And I have heard so many stories from my grandmother or my friends and what media had told me. All that inputs I had taken, and I started giving search in Google. If Google had paid me, I should have paid a very huge check that time. So what all food I should have, what all food I should avoid, all I have to keep myself positive, everything, blah, 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 whatever has entered into my head, I just threw it to Google to get an answer, because I wanted to do the best for my child who was living inside me. The days went by. It was so, so, so lovely. Finally, one day came when some scheduled scan had to happen. It was around the third month. We see, more than the scan, we were actually very inquisitive about it, because after the scan, we had planned to tell our next level of close circle. We wanted to announce my pregnancy to the next level of close circle. So, we were just waiting to finish our scan, return back home and call everyone and tell. So we were really waiting for that moment to happen. I went inside the scan room, and the doctor did her scanning process, and she happened to tell that the heartbeat was missing. See, nothing really went into my ears then. She said, she just went on as per her process. She said the heartbeat is missing. Then she detailed the procedures, the medicines which I had to take to remove that particular life which belongs to me from me totally. Nothing went into my head, but the only thing at that moment, I could not take it at that time. My husband also could not take it, so we asked her for some time. We said we'll again do a rescan after 3 or 4 days, or after 10 days. She did not agree for 10 days, but she said you should be prepared to go through it. So I'll give you some time, but please understand that nothing is going to change. But we thought some miracle will happen. And we took the maximum time which we could take from her. We returned back home. She said, you might even have a flow suddenly. I was praying all my gods. Luckily, I thought nothing happened. I did not experience any flow. So I think my baby was living within me. So I thought some miracle might happen in the scan where the baby will pick up its heartbeat. The day came, we went again, and she did the rescan, and she said, see, I still cannot find any heartbeat, and I cannot wait any further. She gave a list of medicines which I had to take. I took the list of medicine, and she said, I'll have cramping, and I'll get my flow with it, my baby will get ejected. But those 2 days, again, I had cramps, nothing happened. I still felt that my baby did not want to go away from me. Still something is possible, some miracle might happen, but it did not happen. I went to her, she said, gone is gone. You just need to get it cleaned up properly. It is just not working with the meds, so you need to go through a TNC procedure. We went early in the morning, and it was such a painful experience. I thought I'll go into a hospital for a delivery and come back, but I had to go in for a complete cleanup of a life which I believed was within me. We went again early in the morning. All that process happened. You should have seen my husband and my face. The flower had completely, unbloomed. Then the entire process was done, and I just could not take it that when I returned home, it was just 2 of us. The third one in our family is not there anymore. It was a complete day of silence, or 2 or 3 days of silence. Really, myself and my husband did not have anything to even talk with each other. Then we had to return back to our work. The normal deadlines, normal meetings, world was going as usual. But, I was not usual, but I had to act that I'm very normal because I did not tell anyone. I cannot blame anyone. All things were happening, and say after a week or so, there was a function also which I had to attend, a close family function. There again, the entire family is in rejoice. I don't know. Inside, I just could not take it. Something very bad has happened to me. I have lost a life. It's my child. And how can, I see so much of celebration around. I just could not take it, but again, I could not, I don't know, some education or some exposure or something which was blocking me of sharing something bad which has happened to me. I don't know why. I just could not tell. So, but simply I had to put a very false smile and cry inside. Days passed by, months passed by. Then I got another child, and everything was. I really thought I forgot about this miscarriage which I had. I thought I forgot. Then one of my friends' child had passed away. I had gone for the funeral. She was crying, crying, and crying. I was the moment, the more than what she cried, I would have cried more. Truly, it is not for her loss, but it is for the loss which I had experienced many years ago, for which I did not publicly cry. I came back home and I was thinking, why didn't I announce it like this and cry boldly? My grandmother has told me so many stories about her miscarriage. That she has repeated the stories again and again to me so many times. Whenever anyone even asks her how many children you have, she'll even list that miscarriage numbers, and she'll say, I lost 2 kids, and she'll even give a she'll give a short story about it also. If it had happened to my mother, I think even she would have shared it. What is it, which is stopping me from sharing? Why did I did not acknowledge that poor baby which had been growing in me. I don't know whether it is a she or he. I've not seen her or his face, but still it belongs, she or he belongs to my family. Why did I not acknowledge it? Why did I not cry loudly? All these questions kept on going inside my mind. Still it's going inside my mind. Happiness doubles up when shared. So is even sorrow. So if you share there's nothing wrong in sharing the bad things which is happening in your life. When you share it, like happiness, it will not double up. It will definitely get reduced. It took a very long time for me to realize. And it's not education which is going to stop you, or it's just that if you don't share all these things, people are not going to consider you very matured or anything. Take life as it is. Or so many questions like this are going on in my mind. I hope it would be the same experience for many people as well. I'm trying to be more mature to it. I hope I do. Thanks for the opportunity, Eric.
Thank you, Meenakshi, for that sharing. And you can put your responses in the chat. You just hold space for a moment. If anyone feels overwhelmed, maybe you can just place your hand on your heart and just feel your feet on the ground and just hold the space. Yeah. We move on with the next story. I hope I'm clear now, my voice. Yeah, so the next story, I'm going to share my story. Yeah. So whenever someone asks me how many children do I have, I do a mental calculation and I say yes, it's 1 plus 1, but I answer 1, even though I remember I had one child before my current daughter was born. It was almost 9 years ago, and it seemed like a very smooth process. The pregnancy, the checkups, the scans, everything seemed in place, and I seemed to be in the best of my health. And we were soon approaching our due date. My husband was there with me, and family was close. And I remember the night. It was raining very heavily. It was August, and Mumbai has very heavy rains at that time of the year. And then those pains started. I was just one day away from my due date. And so we packed up the bag that we had very diligently made. I had made very diligently, reading up all the right books on what you need when you go for your labor process and all the people that you need around. And then we went to the nursing home. And once I reached there, the nurse, she ushered me inside the labor room. And she put me up on the bed and she put the Doppler to check. So as a medical professional, I could sense something was wrong as I looked at her. And she seemed a bit worried. She checked it again once more and then she went and called for some help. The other lady came and she checked, and they both seemed worried now. And I was worried too. And then they called for the doctor. The doctor came in the middle of the night and she checked, and then she said, yeah, we cannot hear a heartbeat. But we'll just look at a scan and see, just confirm. And that gave me a small sliver of hope. Maybe there's something. Maybe it's just the machine that's kind of faulty. And so she took me and my husband and went to her clinic that was close by. And again, she did the scan, and we looked at the picture together, and nothing seemed to move. And she told me there is no movement and there is no heartbeat. And then she brought us back to the nursing home, and she told me, that we'll have to go ahead with the normal delivery process. And she gave me a few medications and she said, this will take a while. It may even take a day. And so she sat with me for some time, holding my hand and telling me, whatever is the cause, a loss is a loss. And she just held me for some time, as long as she could. And my husband in the meanwhile went and got my parents. And it kept raining all night. And the whole day, the next day I was in labor. And by the next day, I delivered a baby, but she came not crying. And I have a very faint memory of what she looked like because I looked at her through very blurry eyes. And then she was all swaddled up. And I just remember holding her for maybe a few moments, and then she was taken away and my husband and family members buried her. And I thought this was the hardest part, knowing that the baby is stillborn and to have to go through it. But what came after that, I think I was not very prepared for that. For something as small as walking out of the hospital empty-handed, to going home and knowing that all the plans that you made, well, it's all going to change, to facing questions and advice from well-meaning relatives and friends on maybe you should have done this or maybe you should have done that. Oh, I know this doctor, maybe she's not the right person, and things like that. And then a few friends called and I was hoping for some support, and they said, how could you not know? So as a doctor, I am a doctor, and they said, how could you not know? You should have known. And I didn't know what to say, and I just, I think, cut off from them. And till today, I find it very difficult to call them back. And then the social media, looking at pictures, taking a walk in the park, all seemed too weary, too much. And then there were a few relatives who would come and tell me, you shouldn't cry, don't cry. It's not good to cry. Maybe it happened for a reason. Maybe God had a plan. And nothing made sense, and I wanted just everyone to just stop. And I just wanted to be out of there. And I remember so many times I wouldn't step out of my room if someone just came to visit because I just didn't want to face people or go through it again. And then finally, after a month, I got my space. So my husband was a sailor and he was sailing in the midst of the Pacific. And so I got a chance to join him. And there it was just me, him, a crew who knew nothing, and the vast open sea and the open skies. And it seemed perfect. And there I went on trying to get back my confidence and just trying to spend some time with him together. And almost a month later, a lady joined on board. She was the wife of a chief engineer. And though we all started together on the wrong foot, we soon made friends and we were soon doing things together. And it was a month of November, and the ship had a tradition of gifting their crew Christmas presents. And since we didn't have much to do, they gave us this task of wrapping the gifts. And they gave us a small cabin where we sat with a lot of wrapping paper and a lot of boxes. And we sat and we just wrapped. There were around 25-30 gifts that needed to be wrapped, and a lot of chocolates that they were wanting us to pack. And as we were doing this, she started talking, and then I started talking. And somehow it felt safe to share because she was just listening. She wasn't asking questions. And something that I hadn't told anyone, everything just came out. And she just sat there listening. And I felt okay. It seemed okay. Today when I look back, it seems like the listening space that I know today, safe and non-judgmental, which I had. And after that, the next month or so on the ship seemed pretty nice. I could do a lot of stuff, and we really bonded very well. And then we came back home. And while on one of our travels within our city, I just thought of this thing, why not have a support group for people, who have faced stillbirth? And I reached out to a friend of mine who's also a healthcare professional, and I told her, we should do this. I was looking on the net for a lot of support, and it helped me to read through stories of others, but I rarely find a support group, especially in India. And she said, oh, you know, Mary, India, we have big family support. And, you know, once the second child comes along, everybody just forgets about it. And it just becomes part of your memory. And it's all okay. You know, people move on. I said, okay, maybe I don't know enough. Maybe time will heal. And so I waited. And then the second one came along. And we were in Vellore at that time. That's a city in South India where I was working. And when I found out that I was expecting, I didn't want to come back home for the whole delivery labor process or the whole 9 months, because there were too many painful memories or too many people I knew who I knew would give advice, because that's what people like to do sometimes. And so I stayed there and I thought it would be okay, but you know, there was this constant worry. Okay, I wanted a scan every time I visited the doctor, because I just wanted to make sure everything's all right. And the doctor had to just say, you know, just it's okay, it's okay. And I lived in a hospital setting because that's where I worked. And she would be like, it's okay, we'll take care. I know you're worried. And there were a lot of panic moments. And finally, when the baby was born, she was also a girl. And for a moment, we thought, oh, is she back? You know, is it? But then we told ourselves, you know, one doesn't replace another. She was who she is, and my current daughter, she is who she is. And it's been 9 years, and our daughter has grown, and so has our memory stayed with our first child. It's not changed. Maybe today, as I tell the story, the tears are less. The pain seems okay. I have more capacity maybe to take in the pain, but the memory is still very much there. And I feel it's very important to honor that memory. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening. Just holding space for all that has been shared. Just keeping my hand on the heart. Just supporting ourselves for all that has come up. You may share your responses on the chat if it feels okay. We'll go into our third story now.
And this story is told by Allison, and we're playing a recording. Allison is here, but we've chosen to play the recording. So now I'm going to go into screen share.
Waiting to go to Seattle from my island. I was sitting in the ferry line.
Is the sound coming through? Okay.
And I was 2 months pregnant. And though I had miscarried one of my twins, I knew that there was still a remaining heartbeat until this morning, when I started to bleed again. So the doctor told me to come to Seattle, go to radiology first, and then take the elevator up to the women's clinic. So as I sat there in the car, the radio was playing, and I wasn't really paying much attention. It was an interview with a Brahmin, a Hindu priest, and they were talking about reincarnation. But then I heard the interviewer ask, well, in light of reincarnation, why do babies die? And suddenly I was sitting up alert and listening as I heard the Brahmin reply, well, sometimes a soul may choose to visit those that they love for just a short while before moving along on their path in life. And then the ferry line started to move, and so I started the car and pulled on, and when I parked, I turned off the motor and the radio because I just didn't want to think about all that right now. So I just looked out the window at the water as we crossed over to the mainland. Well, when I got to radiology, they told me it would be a long wait. And so I reached into my bag and I pulled out a book that I brought with to take my mind off all that I could not control. There was this book, The Storyteller's Goddess by Carolyn McVicker Edwards. And I opened it at random, and there I found a story that I had never read before, a tale about the Hindu goddess Kali. The people were crying for help. Help us! There is not enough! There is not enough food! There is not enough space! There is not enough! And then high above, in her palace on Mount Meru, the goddess Kali turned in her sleep. There is not enough food, they cried, even though the plants grew so tall that in order to get through the forest, one could barely cut a pathway with a sharp blade. And when the people planted grain, it grew up over their heads. And there still wasn't enough food because there was so many people. Oh, babies were born and they grew and grew, but no one ever left the earth. So, as the people kept crying, help us! There is not enough! There is not enough space! There is not enough food! Gradually, the cries began to permeate Kali's dreams until they became part of her dream too. Until finally, there is not enough! The goddess opened her eyes. Who disturbs my sleep? There is not enough! There it is again! She threw off her covers and she gathered the gray robes of sleep about her. She stood up and strode across the room and threw open the shutters, put her hands on the window ledge and leaned her head out, and as the mountain winds rifled through her hair, she looked down and said, "How long have I been asleep?" Because down there she saw people crammed so tightly together, and animals were trying to squeeze their way through them, and they were all trying to reach these great vats of food that were set up between buildings built so close together that one could barely see the sky. And the scent that rose up from all this was of sweat and dung. The goddess pushed away from the window. She put her hands on her hips. She licked her lips and she called, "Time!" And her servant Time came running. And she said, "Bring me my red sari." And he returned with a sari the color of blood. And she dropped the gray robes of sleep and began to wrap the sari about her and said, "And bring me my jewelry. I will need it as well. And you should dress yourself because we are going out." Well, Time was so surprised. They had not left the palace in so long. And so he picked up those gray robes of sleep and wrapped them around himself. And then he put on his favorite shoes, the ones that are shaped like fish, symbols of life and the cycle of life. And then he went to get her necklace and came back with a necklace that contained 50 glinting skulls. Now some say that these skulls were from the demons that she killed in the long before, because otherwise they would have annihilated all the people. But who knew that there'd be so many people? Well, no sooner had Time clasped that necklace behind Kali's neck than she pointed to a pile of packages all wrapped in golden papers and said, "Be sure to bring these too, and call for my chariot." For on this day, Kali was not going to ride her tiger. Oh no, and she was not going to ride her lion. When her chariot came, it was drawn by 8 white stallions and 8 black mares. And once they loaded the golden packages, Kali and Time stepped aboard. She grabbed those reins and with a snap, they were off. And as the chariot descended down to the earth, they left a trail of smoke and sparks in the sky. Well, when they reached the first village, Kali pulled on those reins to stop. And then all the people began to gather round, and Time stepped down and started to disperse those golden packages. And when they opened them, they found spider webs and dust and rust and mold and mushrooms and worms and the scent of fresh earth and aging. For on this day, the plants learned more than growing and thriving. They also learned to wither back down into the soil to provide food and space so the trees could finally grow. And on this day, the animals continued to have babies, but those babies would grow and age and die. And on this day, people began to age and die as well, so that there would always be room for their children on the earth. Well, after Kali and Time made all the rounds, they returned to her palace, and there she threw herself across her bed exhausted. And so it was up to Time to gently undress her and cover her up with the blanket so that she could sleep again for who knows how long. But you know, even in her sleep, Mother Kali protects us in our dreams. And so it is to this day that the goddess Kali is known as she who dances at funerals and she who sometimes stops babies from being born. And now and then, Kali and Time, they ride in that chariot, only now Time has his own gifts to give. For he gives people the gift of silver and white hairs, and he wraps them in the golden papers of wisdom and acceptance, and he gives his gifts freely to all. Well, when I read that story, it resonated so deeply within me. I mean, I used to work at an OB clinic, so I knew that my situation could go a lot of ways, but after reading that story, I knew that I had lost the second twin. And that knowing gave me a resting place, a quiet spot, some calm, so that I wasn't anxious about what was going to happen next. And I needed that calm to get through the rest of the day. I needed that calm when the radiologist, after I asked, can you detect a heartbeat? Simply said, "You'll have to ask your doctor," and walked out of the room. And as I took the elevator up to the women's clinic, I thought, why would someone who treated me so cold through the appointment and acted so impersonal choose to be a radiologist? And why would he work with pregnant women from the women's clinic? Well, I'll never know. There was another long wait at the clinic, but finally I was shown into a room with a doctor and a nurse, both women, and they told me what I already knew, that the second twin was gone. And then they said, we need to perform a procedure called a D&C. And we can't give you anything for the pain, but we will give you this medication that'll make you forget everything afterwards. And I said, oh, no, I've had that medication twice before. It's never worked. And they said, this time it will. It did not. I remember everything. And as I lay there on the table through a painful procedure, I thought, well, this is goodbye to my babies. And so tears began to trickle from the sides of my eyes down into my hairline as I lay there. And at first they didn't notice anything because my breathing didn't change and I was laying perfectly still. But then the nurse looked up and she said, oh, Allison, you don't have to cry. And then the doctor said, Allison, stop crying. Well, they might as well have told me not to breathe, so I just ignored them and went on. And so then the nurse said, Allison, come on now, stop crying. And the doctor said again, come on, Allison, you don't have to cry, stop crying. And they kept saying this over and over, louder and louder, until finally I said, stop, just stop. I will cry at the loss of my babies, and I need some quiet to do so now. Well, they finally heard me. And so they stopped for a minute, and then they finished the procedure in silence. And then I was led out to the waiting room, and there was my partner, Mark. And I said, "Oh, how long have you been here?" And he said, "Well, when I checked in, they said they just took you in, but nobody ever offered for him to come join me." So we were dispersed with the instructions that I was not supposed to drive for 1 to 2 hours because of that medicine they gave me that never worked. And as we're going down in the elevator, I said, "Mark, we don't have to wait. That stuff didn't even work on me. You know, we have 2 cars now in downtown Seattle, and we didn't want to leave either one there overnight." But Mark said, I want to wait. I want to be safe." So we found a little dark cafe nearby. And by now we're sitting stirring our cold tea and coffee, looking out the window at a gray, dismal, rainy day. And then Mark, he put his hand over mine and he said, "You know, my mother had 2 miscarriages. She used to plant forget-me-nots in their memory. She loved those flowers. They were her favorites." And then he told me something I'd never heard before. He said, "I always wondered about them, Thomas and Teresa, and what it would have been like knowing them, growing up with them as my older brother and sister." And when he mentioned his mother's miscarriage, I thought about that line in the story that described Kali as she who sometimes stops babies from being born. And that reminded me of what that little bit of the interview that I'd heard when the Brahmin said that sometimes the soul may choose to visit those that they love for a short while before moving along on their path in life. Now, Mark and I, we were born Midwestern Catholics. And even though that life was long behind us now, you know, I was starting to get this idea, and it was filling me with a sense of wonder and peace. And even though I was surprised, I was just feeling so happy. And so I sat there in the booth and I told Mark the whole story that I had just read of Kali, and how afterwards I had had this knowledge that both the twins were gone. And then I told him about that little bit of the interview that I heard, and I said, "Mark, what if our twins were Thomas and Teresa, come to visit us for a while?" Well, he's a man of few words. So he just moved closer to me in the booth and put his arm around me, and we both breathed a big sigh. But I took that thought and I held it close and rocked it to my heart to stay. And you know, not long after that, I found 2 garden statues that were child size. They were supposed to be depictions of the life of St. Francis as a child, but to me, one did look like a little boy, but the other one looked like a little girl. And so now they stand not far from here, amongst the forget-me-nots in our garden bed, Thomas and Teresa, who came to visit for a while.
Thank you, Allison.
Thank you for listening.
You just pause for a moment, as if you can share your responses on the chat or just stay with the silence. Thank you for listening to our stories. Eric, you can stop the recording.